Marcus took a deep breath before making his final revelation to the captivated crowd. "My name is Marcus Wellington. My father is Sir Henry Wellington, diplomatic advisor to the royal family. But, more importantly, I'm a graduate of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst and currently serve as a lieutenant in the Special Air Service Reserve." The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembled tourists. They had assumed Marcus was just another privileged young man, possibly someone with family connections, but no personal understanding of military life. The revelation that he was actually a trained Special Forces officer completely reframed everything they had witnessed. His precise salute and detailed knowledge suddenly made perfect sense. "I recognized Guard Mitchell immediately because we served together during a joint training exercise 18 months ago," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the authority of first-hand experience. "She was attached to our unit as a liaison from the Coldstream Guards, and I watched her outperform soldiers who had been in Special Forces for years. Her tactical skills and combat effectiveness were absolutely exceptional." Guard Mitchell felt a flash of recognition as she remembered the training exercise Marcus referenced. She had indeed worked with an SAS unit during a complex urban warfare simulation, but she hadn't immediately connected this well-dressed civilian with the lieutenant who had led their team through challenging scenarios. His appearance out of uniform had completely transformed his identity. The crowd was now hanging on Marcus's every word, understanding that they were receiving first-hand testimony from someone with genuine credentials and personal knowledge. This wasn't second-hand information or research, but direct experience from within the military community. His defense of Guard Mitchell carried the weight of professional respect between elite soldiers. During that exercise, Guard Mitchell successfully neutralized four simulated terrorists while protecting a mock VIP. Marcus explained, his eyes briefly meeting the guards before returning to the crowd. "Her performance was so impressive that our commanding officer recommended her for advanced protection training. She earned every qualification through merit, not quotas or politics." The teenage tourists who had been mocking the guard earlier now looked as if they wanted to disappear entirely. They had been making fun of someone who could have easily subdued all of them without any real effort. Their recorded videos, which had seemed hilarious moments before, now appeared incredibly disrespectful and embarrassing. Several of them deleted the footage on the spot. An American tourist raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, how can we tell which guards have combat experience versus those who are purely ceremonial?" His question reflected the genuine curiosity that had replaced the earlier dismissive attitudes throughout the crowd. Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "Actually, that's the point many people miss. There are no purely ceremonial guards. Every person standing at these posts has completed full military training and demonstrated exceptional capabilities. The ceremonial assignments are rotations for active duty soldiers, not separate positions for people who can't handle real military service." This information amazed the crowd even further. They had assumed that some guards were real soldiers, while others were just performers hired for tourist appeal. Learning that every single guard was a qualified military professional with potential combat experience changed their perception of the entire institution. The tradition suddenly seemed much more meaningful and substantial. Guard Mitchell appreciated Marcus's continued education of the crowd, though she remained focused on her duties. His explanations were accurate and helped these civilians understand realities that military personnel often took for granted. Too many people saw uniforms and ceremonies without comprehending the training, sacrifice, and dedication required to earn such positions. A British military historian in the crowd spoke up with obvious excitement. "Lieutenant Wellington, could you explain how the selection process works for Royal Guard assignments? I've always wondered about the criteria." His academic interest reflected the educational value of Marcus's unexpected intervention. "The process is extremely competitive," Marcus replied, clearly comfortable sharing information that wasn't classified but rarely discussed with civilians. "Candidates need exemplary service records, security clearances, physical fitness scores in the top percentiles, and recommendations from commanding officers." Guard Mitchell's selection represents recognition of exceptional military achievement. The crowd listened intently as Marcus provided insights into military culture that most civilians never encountered. His explanation helped them understand that Royal Guard duty was actually a prestigious assignment rather than a simple job. The selection criteria eliminated anyone who wasn't a proven performer with outstanding qualifications and unquestionable reliability. The stillness you observe isn't just tradition, Marcus continued, warming to his educational role. It's a demonstration of mental discipline and physical control that translates directly to combat effectiveness. A soldier who can maintain perfect composure under tourist provocation will remain calm under enemy fire. The ceremonial skills reflect real military capabilities. This connection between ceremonial duties and combat readiness hadn't occurred to most observers. They had seen the stillness as mere tradition or performance art rather than practical military training. Understanding the functional purpose behind the formality gave them new appreciation for both the difficulty and the relevance of what they were witnessing. The elderly Falklands veteran stepped forward again, his respect for Guard Mitchell and Marcus both clearly evident. "Young man, thank you for educating these people properly. Too many civilians don't understand what military service really means, and they need to hear it from someone with your credentials and experience." Marcus nodded respectfully to the veteran. "Sir, your generation set the standard for military excellence that we try to maintain today. Guard Mitchell and all the soldiers serving in these ceremonial roles are carrying forward traditions established by people like yourself who prove their worth in actual combat." The exchange between the young Special Forces officer and the veteran created a powerful moment that touched everyone present. The continuity of military service across generations became tangible as these two men honored each other and the Guard they both recognized as a worthy successor to their traditions of excellence and sacrifice. Guard Mitchell felt deeply moved by the recognition and respect being shown, though she maintained her professional bearing. Throughout her military career, she had sometimes felt that civilians didn't understand or appreciate the sacrifices made by service members. This spontaneous education session provided exactly the kind of understanding that bridged the gap between military and civilian communities. As the crowd began to disperse, many tourists approached Marcus to thank him for the education they had received. Parents told him they would share the information with their children to help them better understand military service. Tour guides asked for additional resources to provide more accurate information about the Guards and their qualifications. The woman who had complained about taxpayers funding useless traditions made a point of speaking directly to Marcus before leaving. "I owe Guard Mitchell and all the other guards an apology. I had no idea what they represented or what they had accomplished. Thank you for opening my eyes to the reality behind the ceremony." Marcus accepted her apology graciously while pointing out that her willingness to learn and change her perspective was exactly what made education valuable. The important thing isn't that you didn't know before, but that you're willing to understand now. That's what Guard Mitchell and all military personnel serve to protect: the freedom to learn, grow, and express ourselves. As the crowd finally thinned, Marcus approached Guard Mitchell one last time. He stopped at the proper distance and offered another perfect military salute, holding it for the appropriate duration before speaking quietly. "Guard Mitchell, it was an honor to serve alongside you during training, and it's an honor to see you representing the regiment with such distinction." For just a moment, the slightest smile appeared at the corners of Guard Mitchell's mouth before her expression returned to perfect ceremonial composure. That brief acknowledgement meant more to Marcus than any words could have expressed. He had successfully defended her honor, educated the public about military service, and reminded everyone present that real heroes often stand quietly among us. The incident at Buckingham Palace became a story that tourists would tell for years to come. Marcus's intervention had transformed a moment of potential disrespect into a powerful lesson about military service, sacrifice, and the true meaning behind ceremonial traditions. Most importantly, it had given Guard Mitchell and her fellow soldiers the recognition they deserved for their exceptional dedication and service to their country. The morning sun climbed higher over the palace as normal tourist activities resumed, but the atmosphere had been permanently changed by one young man's decision to stand up for military excellence and educate civilians about the reality behind the traditions they were observing. The royal guards continued their duties with the knowledge that at least some members of the public truly understood and appreciated their service. Marcus's voice carried clearly across the hushed courtyard as he addressed the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet Guard Sarah Mitchell of the Coldstream Guards. She served 2 tours in Afghanistan, received the Military Cross for gallantry under enemy fire, and saved the lives of 3 wounded soldiers during a Taliban ambush in Helmand province." The tourist's expressions shifted from confusion to amazement as Marcus continued his unexpected announcement. Nobody had expected this well-dressed young man to possess such detailed knowledge about the motionless guard's military background. His words carried the authority of someone with insider access to information that wasn't readily available to the general public. Guard Mitchell volunteered for frontline combat duty when women weren't officially allowed in infantry roles, Marcus explained, his voice filled with genuine admiration. She served alongside the parachute regiment during some of the fiercest fighting in Afghanistan. The soldiers she saved nominated her for the Military Cross after she dragged them to safety under heavy machine gun fire. The crowd began murmuring with newfound respect as they absorbed this information. The complaints about guards being just for show suddenly seemed foolish and ignorant. These tourists were looking at a genuine war hero who had risked her life for her comrades and her country. The ceremonial red coat and bearskin hat represented much more than mere tradition. Guard Mitchell maintained her rigid stance, but Marcus could see the slight surprise in her eyes. His knowledge of her service record was accurate and detailed, suggesting connections within military circles that went beyond casual research. She wondered who this young man was and how he had obtained such specific information about her background and achievements. Marcus wasn't finished with his revelations. He turned to face the crowd more directly, ensuring his words reached every person in the courtyard. 3 months ago, Guard Mitchell completed the grueling Royal Military Police Close Protection course, scoring the highest marks in her class. She's trained in advanced combat techniques, tactical shooting, and threat assessment. She could neutralize most security threats before anyone realized what was happening. The teenagers who had been mocking the guard earlier now looked embarrassed and ashamed. Their silly faces and ridiculous poses seemed incredibly disrespectful in light of what they now knew about her military accomplishments. Several of them stepped back, suddenly, aware that they had been taunting someone who could probably defeat all of them simultaneously without breaking a sweat. An elderly veteran in the crowd stepped forward, tears forming in his eyes as he looked at Guard Mitchell with profound respect. His weathered face showed recognition of someone who understood the true cost of military service. He had served in the Falklands War and knew the courage required for the actions Marcus had described. Without saying a word, he offered his own crisp military salute to honor her service. The gesture triggered a wave of emotion through the crowd as other veterans and military family members began identifying themselves. A mother whose son had served in Afghanistan approached with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by meeting someone who had shared similar dangers and challenges. The atmosphere transformed from casual tourism to genuine reverence for military sacrifice. Marcus watched this transformation with deep satisfaction. His goal had been to educate these tourists about the reality behind the ceremonial facade, and he was succeeding beyond his expectations. Too many people saw the guards as mere decorations without understanding the incredible qualifications required for such positions. Every guard standing at royal posts had earned their place through exceptional service. The bearskin hat you see represents the Coldstream Guards Regiment, which has served the crown for over 360 years. Marcus continued his impromptu education session. Every person wearing this uniform has passed rigorous selection processes and demonstrated exceptional military capabilities. They're not actors or tourist attractions. They're elite soldiers temporarily assigned to ceremonial duties. Guard Mitchell felt a warmth spreading through her chest despite her professional composure. Throughout her ceremonial duties, she had endured countless insults, ignorant comments, and disrespectful behavior from tourists who saw her as nothing more than a living statue. This young man's defense of her service and the institution she represented meant more than he could possibly know. The crowd's entire dynamic had shifted dramatically. Tour guides were frantically researching information about the guards' regiments to provide more accurate commentary for their groups. Parents began explaining to their children about military service and the sacrifices made by soldiers. The casual atmosphere had been replaced by serious appreciation for the gravity of what these ceremonies represented. Marcus felt compelled to share one more crucial detail that would complete his educational mission. Guard Mitchell's current assignment isn't just ceremonial duty. She's part of an elite protection detail responsible for royal family security. Her training includes advanced threat recognition, emergency response protocols, and coordination with intelligence services. She's quite literally one of the most qualified security professionals in the entire world. This revelation stunned the crowd even further. The idea that this motionless figure in ceremonial dress was actually an active security operative changed everything about how they viewed the situation. The perfect stillness wasn't just traditional discipline, but professional surveillance technique. The unwavering attention wasn't ceremonial theater, but genuine threat assessment. A security consultant in the crowd recognized the truth in Marcus's words. He had worked with military protection details before and understood the level of training required for royal security assignments. Looking at Guard Mitchell with professional appreciation, he could see the subtle signs of someone maintaining tactical awareness while appearing completely motionless. Her positioning allowed optimal observation of the entire courtyard. The woman who had earlier complained about taxpayers funding useless traditions now looked thoroughly embarrassed. She approached Marcus hesitantly, clearly wanting to apologize for her ignorant comments, but unsure how to proceed. Her criticism had been based on complete misunderstanding of what she was observing, and the education she had just received made her feel foolish and disrespectful. Marcus noticed her discomfort and offered a gentle smile. It's perfectly understandable to have questions about traditions you're not familiar with. The important thing is being willing to learn when presented with new information. These ceremonies have deep meaning and represent the dedication of remarkable people like Guard Mitchell. The apology session began as multiple tourists approached to express their regret for earlier comments and behavior. The teenagers who had been making faces looked particularly ashamed, understanding now that their actions had been directed towards someone who had risked her life in combat. Their silly videos suddenly seemed cruel and ignorant rather than harmless fun. Guard Mitchell could hear these apologies, but remained focused on her duty. Her training demanded continued vigilance regardless of external circumstances, and the crowd's changed attitude didn't alter her responsibility for security and ceremonial obligations. However, she felt deeply gratified by the recognition of her service and the education these tourists were receiving about military dedication. As the conversations continued around her, Marcus prepared to reveal the final piece of information that would explain his detailed knowledge and unexpected intervention. His connection to the royal family and military institutions went deeper than anyone had imagined, and his motivation for defending Guard Mitchell stemmed from personal understanding of military sacrifice and dedication. The crowd had grown significantly as word spread about the extraordinary scene unfolding in the courtyard. Palace staff members had noticed the unusual gathering but recognized that the situation was positive and educational rather than disruptive. They allowed the impromptu lesson to continue, understanding the value of public education about the reality behind royal traditions. Marcus looked around at the transformed crowd before making his final announcement. What he revealed would not only explain his extensive knowledge, but also demonstrate that respect for military service transcended social boundaries and connected people across different backgrounds and experiences. His words would complete the education process and leave every observer with a profound new understanding of duty, honor, and sacrifice. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered for the daily changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd stood Marcus Wellington, a 22-year-old university student whose father happened to be Sir Henry Wellington, one of Britain's most respected diplomats and close advisor to the royal family. Marcus had grown up with privilege, but unlike many wealthy young men, he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogant entitlement. The red-coated guards stood motionless at their posts, their tall bearskin hats creating an imposing silhouette against the palace walls. Each guard represented years of military training and unwavering dedication to duty. They were hand-picked soldiers from elite regiments, trained to remain perfectly still regardless of weather, provocation, or distraction. Their discipline was legendary, and tourists often tried unsuccessfully to make them react. Guard Sarah Mitchell had been stationed at her post for 43 minutes. At 26, she was one of the few female guards in the Queen's Guard, having earned her position through exceptional service in the Coldstream Guards. Her military record included 2 tours in Afghanistan and commendations for bravery under fire. Standing motionless in the ceremonial uniform was perhaps the most challenging aspect of her current assignment, requiring mental strength that matched her physical capabilities. The crowd pressed closer as the ceremony time approached. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders for better views while tour guides explained the historical significance of the tradition. Street performers entertained the waiting masses, and vendors sold souvenirs to eager tourists. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Marcus noticed the female guard immediately. Something about her perfect posture and unwavering focus impressed him. He had attended many royal ceremonies throughout his childhood, but this guard seemed different. There was an intensity in her stance that spoke of genuine military experience rather than mere ceremonial duty. Her eyes remained fixed straight ahead, but Marcus could sense the alertness beneath the formal exterior. A group of teenage tourists began making silly faces at Guard Mitchell, trying to provoke a reaction. They waved their hands, made ridiculous poses, and even attempted to mimic her stance. The guard remained completely unmoved, her breathing steady and controlled. Marcus watched this display with growing irritation. These tourists had no understanding of what they were mocking. The teenagers grew bolder, stepping closer to the guard's position. One particularly obnoxious youth began making exaggerated military salutes while his friends laughed and recorded videos. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he observed their disrespectful behavior. This was exactly the type of entitled tourist behavior that gave visitors a bad reputation. A middle-aged woman in the crowd began complaining loudly about the guards being just for show and questioned why taxpayers funded such useless traditions. Her voice carried across the courtyard, and several other tourists joined her criticism. Marcus watched Guard Mitchell's face carefully, noting the slight tightening around her eyes despite her professional composure. These people had no idea what they were talking about. The criticism continued to build as more voices joined the conversation. Someone suggested that the guards were probably just actors hired for tourism purposes. Another person claimed that real soldiers would never stand so still and that the whole thing was an elaborate performance. Marcus felt his anger rising as these uninformed opinions spread through the crowd like wildfire. Guard Mitchell had heard every possible insult and criticism during her time on ceremonial duty. Tourists often assumed that guards were purely decorative, unaware that each person standing at attention was a trained combat soldier. She had learned to filter out the noise and maintain her focus, but today's comments seemed particularly harsh and ignorant. Still, she remained perfectly still, her training overriding any personal feelings. As the criticism reached a crescendo, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He had grown up around military personnel through his father's work and understood the sacrifice and dedication required for such service. These tourists were insulting not just this individual guard, but the entire institution she represented. Something needed to be done to demonstrate the reality of the situation. Marcus began walking toward Guard Mitchell's position with purposeful strides. The crowd noticed his movement, and conversations gradually died down as people wondered what this well-dressed young man intended to do. His confident demeanor and expensive clothing suggested he wasn't just another tourist, and whispers began spreading about his possible identity. The distance between Marcus and the guard closed steadily. Other tourists stepped aside, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Camera phones were raised as people prepared to capture whatever drama was unfolding. The atmosphere shifted from casual tourism to focused attention as Marcus approached the motionless figure in red. Guard Mitchell was aware of the approaching figure in her peripheral vision, but maintained her rigid stance. Her training had prepared her for all types of interactions, from harmless tourists to potential security threats. This young man's confident approach triggered her heightened awareness, though she gave no outward sign of concern. Every muscle remained locked in perfect military bearing. When Marcus reached the guard's position, he stopped directly in front of her and looked into her eyes with unmistakable respect. The crowd held its collective breath, expecting him to attempt some foolish prank or disrespectful gesture like so many tourists before him. Instead, Marcus did something completely unexpected that would transform the entire situation and reveal truths that no one in the crowd could have imagined. The young man reached up slowly and deliberately toward the guard's bearskin hat. Gasps echoed through the crowd as people assumed they were witnessing an act of incredible disrespect and stupidity. Security cameras captured every moment as Marcus's hand moved toward the ceremonial headpiece that represented centuries of military tradition and honor. But Marcus wasn't acting out of disrespect or entitled privilege. His action was calculated and purposeful, designed to demonstrate something profound about the nature of duty, respect, and true military bearing. What happened next would shock every observer and reveal the extraordinary character of both the young man and the guard he was challenging. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and pointing fingers as Marcus's hand continued its upward trajectory. Tour guides began moving toward the scene, uncertain whether to intervene or simply observe. Palace security personnel noticed the commotion and began adjusting their positions, ready to respond if the situation escalated beyond acceptable boundaries. Guard Mitchell felt the approach of the young man's hand, but remained absolutely motionless. Her training demanded complete stillness regardless of provocation, and she had endured far worse challenges during her ceremonial duties. Whatever this privileged tourist intended to do, she would maintain her professional bearing and deal with the consequences through proper channels afterward. The tension in the courtyard became palpable as Marcus's hand drew closer to the bearskin hat. Tourists pressed forward to get better views while others stepped back, uncomfortable with the developing confrontation. The moment stretched endlessly as everyone waited to see what would happen when entitled privilege met unwavering military discipline. Just as Marcus's fingers were about to make contact with the ceremonial hat, his movements suddenly stopped. His hand hovered mere inches from the bearskin, close enough to touch but carefully restrained. The crowd held its breath, confused by this unexpected hesitation. What they couldn't understand was that Marcus had never intended to actually remove or touch the hat. Instead, Marcus stepped back slightly and executed a perfect military salute with precision that stunned every observer. His movements were crisp, controlled, and unmistakably professional. This wasn't the awkward attempt of a civilian mimicking military customs, but the practiced motion of someone with genuine military training and understanding. The crowd's confusion deepened as they tried to process what they were witnessing. This well-dressed young man wasn't attempting to humiliate or disrespect the guard. Instead, he was offering her the highest form of military recognition and respect. His salute was held with perfect form, demonstrating knowledge and appreciation that went far beyond typical tourist understanding. Guard Mitchell's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she recognized the quality of the salute being offered. This wasn't a mockery or casual gesture, but a genuine military greeting executed with exceptional skill. For the first time during her duty shift, she felt a flicker of surprise beneath her professional composure. This young man clearly had military background that wasn't immediately obvious. The salute continued for the appropriate duration before Marcus lowered his hand with the same precision he had displayed throughout the gesture. The crowd remained silent, struggling to understand the significance of what they had witnessed. The expected confrontation had transformed into something entirely different, leaving tourists confused and tour guides scrambling to explain the unexpected development. Marcus took another step back and spoke in a clear, carrying voice that reached across the courtyard. His words would explain his actions and reveal truths about military service that would educate every person present. What he said next would not only vindicate Guard Mitchell's dedication, but also demonstrate the profound respect that true military families held for those who served with honor and distinction.